Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is actually a very first video, a very first tutorial that I'm uploading to my channel, so I hope I don't screw up too many times during the recording session. I hope you guys still like it, and I hope it's useful for you guys. Okay, so let's start the tutorial, and first of all let's define what is the thing that we're going to be developing here. And we're going to be developing a generic model component. A model component is something that you might need in almost every project that you build, and it all comes down to a basic model component which knows if it's open, if it's closed. It renders the backdrop, it's like semi-transparent black or white background around it with a focus on model content. And this is the basic model component which you can build on top, developing a more specific model components. Like you can develop a dialog box, you can develop a model with a form, with any sort of content, but under the hood it will use this very basic components. And that's what we will develop during this course, and we will also learn how to use this basic component to build some more specific use cases. For instance, a dialog box. So without further ado, let's jump into coding, and let's start with setting our project up. I'm gonna use Vite in order to scaffold my React application. You can do whatever approach you like. You can use Create React App or Next or Vite, or you can scaffold the React application with TypeScript on your own if you have enough experience. It doesn't actually matter. The setup doesn't matter. Main prerequisites for this lesson is Node.js 18+ version, NPM, TypeScript, React, and it's basically it. We'll add a couple of dependencies alongside this course, but in case you have Node, you have React, TypeScript, you should be okay to follow along with this course. And of course you can skip the intro part where we set up the project, in case you have already set it up, or in case you want to follow your own way to set up your React project. Please go ahead and do that and skip the this initial part. And for all of you who want to follow up alongside me, let's go ahead and create our project. So let's take a look. Let's see that we have a folder prepared to it. Recordings. Let's open our terminal here, and let's scaffold our Vite React project. Vite latest. Let's add a name to our project, which is going to be something like generic model component. We're going to use React. We're going to use TypeScript. And here we go, we're done. We can open our IDE to see our project. I'm using WebStorm. You can use whatever IDE or coding editor you prefer. It doesn't really matter. And as you can see, we have the structure of our project ready for us. So let's start by installing dependencies. As our dependencies have installed, let's check that we can actually run the project. Let's run it. Dev mode, open our browser, localhost, and we can see the default page for with React setup. Let's continue by doing some cleanup here. So basically this is the structure of the application, and we scaffold it with React Vite, and there's a lot of stuff that we don't need here. We're not gonna need any CSS files here, so let's delete them. We will not need assets folder, so let's delete that as well. And basically let's check what our application consists of. So the entry point in our case is main.tsx file, It might be different in your case depending on which approach you took to set up your React app, but in our case it's main TSX. And you can see it imports some CSS, which we have already deleted, so let's clean it up here as well. And basically all it does is imports an app TSX component and renders it as usual in a root element. So that means we should take a look at our app TSX and see what we got here. Again, some app CSS import. We deleted that file, we don't need that import anymore. We also don't need any assets since we deleted them, and we can also clean up everything within this function. We remove use states, we remove all the content here, and we can have some div here. And let's add some nice heading. So I'm not really good at typing things, as you can see. Finally, great success. So you can see it renders our hello message. It doesn't look good, but you see that we removed all the CSS, and let's add some styling of our own to make this page look a little bit better. Now we will use SCSS modules in this project, and in order for us to do so, we need to install additional library, which is Sass. There are two options, actually multiple options. We can use Sass library, we can use not Sass library. I'm not going to go deeper into differences of these two libraries, but just for this particular example, we're using Sass, and let's add it to our project as a dependency. We installed this dependency, and now we can work with SCSS files and import them into our components. So let's start with some styling for app TSX. Let's create a SCSS module. In our src file, so it has to be in the same file that where app TSX lives. And let's add some basic class there. It can be app container, and this basic class should have some styling properties, some styling for our app. So let's display flags. It has to be centered. Line item center, and let's make it and full width. And let's use some background color. And that's it for our basic styling. Now we need a way to use this class name to style this guy here. In order for us to do that, let's import styles from the module that we just declared and apply them by calling class name property on div. And we're going to use styles and the name of our class that we defined there. So app container is the class name that we defined here, and we're using here, applying it to this guy here, to this class name. Let's take a look at our page, and it doesn't look great. Let's take a look on what's going on here. Display flags, content center, line item center, and of course I did a stupid mistake here. So now we have it 100% width, 100 VH, 100 VW. That means it takes full height, full width available. The content is centered. That's basically all we want to do with our app TS6 at the moment. And let's start with our component development. In order to do that, let's create a components directory. And this is the directory that's gonna be a home for our component or components. And let's develop a component itself. So it's gonna be a generic model, and this is where our component will live. And let's create a CSS module directly. This is where our styles applied to the component will live. Since we don't need any other guys here, let's close them for now. Let's split the screen and have these two guys here, and let's develop the generic model component. Let's export a default function named generic model. And let's think of our structure a bit. So in order for us to achieve the functionality that we want, we need a structure like that. We need to have an outer div and we need to have an inner div. So this outer div, it will be the backdrop, the semi-transparent background that we have when we have our model open. And the actual content of our model will live here, and we'll pass the content of our model here by using React children prop. So to work further with this structure, let's add some styles. Let's add some basic styles. And let's start with developing model backdrop class. It will have position fixed, top 0, left 0. It has to be 100% width, 100% height, and for background color we're going to use RGBA with a black color, semi-transparent black color. So what we're adding here basically is black color with 50% of transparency. And we also want to justify content and align items center. That's it for our backdrop for now. We can apply these styles directly to this guy by importing styles from the SCSS module that we have developed here. And let's apply it by adding a class name and using styles and adding a backdrop class name here, like that. Now what we want to do is create a class name to style this guy here, which is going to be a box, a div where our content lives. So let's create a model content class name and add some basic styling here. So we can add a background color of white. Basically that's it. Let's apply this style can copy this entire style declaration and just replace it with proper class name, and let's add something here so that it's visible for us. And now we need a way to view our component, so let's just import it into our app.tsx. And in order for us to do that, let's add another div here and add the component. So we're importing it from components, and let's take a look at our page to see what it looks like. And it doesn't look great. You see that some of the CSS is broken here. Let's take a look why. Modal content just sticks to the top. And of course, I made a stupid mistake. I forgot to add display flags to modal backdrop class. So it should be fine now. As you can see, our model works fine. We have a backdrop around our content. We have a centered model content, but at the moment it's not really functional, so it's kind of always open, and this is not the desired functionality for the model component to be always open. So let's get back to our code and fix that part. In order for us to fix that part, let's first teach our generic model to be open or closed. So we need a way to let this component know its own state. So first of all, let's check if it's open or closed, and then either render its content or return null. And it's time for us to define some interface for the props that we're going to be supplying this generic model with. Let's develop an interface and call it iGeneric props. And first prop our component is going to receive is open prop, which will be Boolean. So let's teach our component how to work with the props. We're using our interface here and the structuring properties right here. And in case this guy is not open, we want to return null here. That means whenever the model is not open, we return null from this component, and we don't see anything like that. We don't see it open by default. You see, it's gone now, because if it's not open, it returns null. The model is closed. Now, obviously, in order for us to use the component, we need to use it with the proper props. Proper props, that sounds nice. So let's go back to app.tsx, where we are consuming and using this component, and you can see that TypeScript is not happy. It's saying property is open is missing, because we declared it in the component, in the interface, but we are not supplying it here. So let's supply it. Now let's change it, let it be true for now. Let's take a look, and you can see that our model is open now. There's no way to close it, there's no way to do anything with it. It's just open by default, because we set this is open property to true always, and this is not the case. This is not the way we want to do that. So we need some state here to keep the state of our model. So let's call it generic model open set generic model open, and it will be use state, and it will be false by default. And now we can use this variable and pass it to isOpenProp of generic model to control the state of our model. Currently it's closed because you can see that we set it to false by default. If you set it to true, this guy will be open again. But we set it to false. Apologies. We set it to false because this is the desired behavior, and we need to create a function here to open our model when we want it. So we have a function like here, and we can set generic model open to true. Actually, this is just a wrapper function around around the state setter, so you can use it or you can skip it and just use the state setter directly. It's up to you guys on how to work. So yeah, we can go. I usually like to create this wrapper functions around state setters so that it's easier to work, and you don't have to create the synonymous functions, on-click functions whenever you're using it. But it's up to you guys how you like to work with your functions. And let's create some sort of interface, a button to trigger model open. So this button should open a model for us. It doesn't look great here. Let's change some of the styles in our app container. Let's change flex direction to column. These are the styles related to our app TSX. So I changed them and we have it a bit nicer now. We have open generic model button and it doesn't work. Let's take a look why. Because we don't have any on-click set to this button. Let's add an on-click property here, and let's pass on generic model open function here so that we can open our generic model component. Let's take a look. And it opens nicely, but it doesn't close. There's no way for us to close the model, because obviously we don't have any buttons here, and we don't have any way to close it once we have opened it. Now, one of the desired functionalities for a model is when you click away, it gets closed. There are use cases where you want to disable this functionality, but usually when you click away, click in this area, the model should close, or you should provide any other means to close it. And since we are developing a generic component, we need to add this functionality. So let's add this functionality to close it when we click away. And in order for us to achieve that, we need to basically, one of the simple ways how we can achieve that, we can add an on-click function here on the outer, on the backdrop component, on this outer div, that when we click here, the model is closed. So we need to pass an on-click function here. And where do we get it get this on-click function? So obviously we need to pass it through the prop. So let's expand our interface and add onClose prop there, which will be a simple function which will return void. And we can destructure this prop here, and we can add this onClose as a value for onClick attribute for our div here. And of course we also need to check the usage of our component and add the missing function there, and we can create it. We can either create a wrapper function like that. Actually, I see a typo there. It should be a model open. So we can create a function which will trigger set generic model open to false, or we can pass it here directly like that. an anonymous function that will set generic open false. And again, guys, it's up to you how you work, how you prefer to work, but I prefer to create a wrapper function. Since with this approach you're able to use callback later on to improve performance, and we're going to use it like that. So basically we're just closing the model here. And let's add this function here. Now let's take a look at our model. You see, at the moment when we are opening it, we can close it by clicking away anywhere here in this area. The model gets closed. But we have another problem here. If we click in the model content area, it closes as well. So why is it happening? It's happening because this model, this guy here, lives within this parent, and by default when we're clicking this area here, we're still propagating this click event up to its parent, and we're triggering the onClose function, which is set on onClick here. So there's we need to find a way to prevent any click here on propagating further on to its parent and triggering the onClick event here. So let's add some basic stuff here. So this is going to be an anonymous function which accepts an event as its parameter, and then further we are just calling the event stop propagation method. I'm not gonna go deeper into that. You can check other resources like Mozilla developers resource on how stop propagation works. But basically, for you guys to know, by adding this onClick, we are preventing model to close when we are clicking within this content here. So if you take a look now, we can still close it by clicking away, but if we click within the content of the model, nothing changes. It stays open, and that's the functionality we'd like to achieve here. And there's another thing that I want to be adding here. As I mentioned, sometimes you want to prevent this model from closing when you're clicking outside, and you want to delegate model closing functionality entirely to some other elements in your UI. So we need a way to also prevent this kind of default behavior, and we can achieve that by adding another property here. Let's call it something like and it will be an optional parameter, and it will be of Boolean type. And when we have this property, we can actually do a little trick here. So we can say onClick, if this guy is true here, then we provide undefined, and if it's false, we provide onClose. So whenever we set this guy here to be true, so we want to disable click away close, this guy is true, we provide undefined to onClick function, and this guy will not close when we click away. When we click here, when we click away, when we click in this area, it will not close when this prop is true. Otherwise, it will trigger our onClose function and it will close model when we click away here. Let's test this functionality. Let's go back here on our to our app.tsx folder, and let's add this prop to our component, and let's see what's going on here. So we open it, we click away, nothing happens, it's not closed. We try to set it false, we can click away and close the component. And we will just leave it true. Actually, for this example, we don't need to leave it true, we'll leave it like that. since it's a very generic one. It opens and it closes. And there's another problem that we have to solve. Here in generic model, you see that we have model content and it's hard-coded here. Obviously, it's not the way we want to use our component, since the very purpose of this tutorial is to build a generic model component which can render any type of content within itself, and basically just have this model component functionality to open, to close, to provide the backdrop, etc. So there's a simple way for us to achieve that, and that is by providing a children prop here. Now, if you're not familiar with React children concept, I encourage you to go read React documentation and learn about that. I'm not going to go any deeper here on that topic because it's kind of not within the scope of this lesson, but let's expand our interface in order to allow the component to receive children prop. And we are going to extend our interface with props with children, which is a type that comes from React. And now we're able to use children here. And of course, we also need to alter the way we use our components. Since we are providing children, we need to use it in this manner, and we can actually add some content here. Let's take a look at our app, and you can see that now we have a very generic model component that can render some children, some content, and we pass to it. It can open, it can close, and basically the generic component setup is almost done here. We need to develop some dialog box on top of that component, for instance, because it's not very useful at the moment. The base component is not useful. It's not meant to be used on the project like that, and we need to develop something nicer on top of that. Well, let's go ahead and do that, and let's create some example of dialog box here. Let's create another div, and let's use generic model component. Let's set some content to it, like and let's set some nice buttons. Confirm, cancel, and let's add state for this particular model. So we call it dialog box, so let's use state false, and this is the variable that will check our state here. And on close, let's provide a function this function will basically trigger set dialog box open with a false value. Let's give it to this guy here. And let's also add a button to open that dialog box. So here, open dialog box. And of course we need a function for that. And it's gonna open it, it's gonna be true. So now we have a proper setup. We have a new button which has on dialog box open set to its on click property, and it should open our dialog box. Let's take a look at our app. We can open a generic model and we can open a dialog box which uses generic model under the hood, and it has some additional content provided for it, like confirm, cancel buttons. And currently they don't do anything, but that's something that we will fix now. Now we need obviously two functions to handle confirm click, to handle cancel click, and let's develop them right now. So when we confirm the dialog box, we want to run this function. And let's just do some simple console log to let us know confirmed, and let's close the dialog box and we confirm. We can do something similar for cancel scenario. And also console log, dialog box, cancelled, and we will close the dialog box. Alright, now we can add these functions to confirm and cancel buttons here. So confirm has on dialog box confirm, and on cancel button will has on dialog box cancel. Let's take a look at our solution right here. Let's take a look at the console and try to open dialog box. And we will confirm. You see that proper function gets triggered. We cancel it. You see proper function gets triggered. All good. Let's get back to our code and let's try to make these guys look a little bit nicer. So for that we can develop some CSS, and here we come to a moment where we need to think a little bit about our code structure. So at the moment app.tsx contains all the logic related to opening and closing of the models that we have here for demo purposes, but in real world, when developing a dialog box, we might want to structure our code a bit differently. So for this guy we would probably develop another component which would use generic model under the hood, which would have some logic in it, maybe applicable to dialog box model, and that would be another component. Actually, dialog box component itself can be in a way generic component, because we can use dialog boxes for different ways, and these dialog boxes could differ. We can provide different on click, on cancel, on confirm functions to it. So a dialog box can be a generic component built on top of another very generic component, which is a generic modal in our case. Here, for demo purposes, we're going to follow a bit simplified approach, and we're going to add classes and styles applicable to this dialog box right here in app module SCSS. But when you're building a real life application, you would follow a different approach. You would create a component, a dialog box component, and store all the CSS related to it within the component structure, exactly as we did for generic model here. Okay, let's proceed with our styling problem, and let's open up the app module SCSS, and let's add some styles related to this guy here. So first of all, you can add a div here where all of our content lives, and let's style this guy. Let's call it dialog box. Display flags, column. Let's add some padding to it. Some border radius, and that's it for now. And we're going to use a class name property to set proper class name to this guy here. Now let's take a look at the result. You can see that we have padding, some styles are being applied, and we come to a problem that we don't have this border radius being applied here properly, although we have specified it here. Why is it happening? It's because in our generic model, in the CSS file here, we have a background color of model content set to white, and we don't specify any border radius property here. So our border radius actually works properly for dialog box, but since we have white background here, it just overrides, it's not overriding, it just appears below the border radius, and it looks like it's a square border radius here. So we could just remove the background here entirely, and we need to add it here in our dialog box. So let's set background color, and let's select white. And now the dialog box has nice rounded corners as we set here, and there's still some styling to apply, of course. Let's add some width property, and let's display the buttons nicely. For that we can use another div, and we can have something like dialog box footer, display flags, and space between. And apply this class name here. So we have built like a dialog box footer with buttons with buttons aligned like that. And let's also style the content that we have here. Let's have it as a div instead of a p, and let's have some styles. I don't know. Let's have padding of 20 pixels. Take a look where we want to apply this padding. Yeah, let's add margin bottom. 20 pixels. Something like that. Like very basic styling. And of course we want to apply it here. Styles. Dialog box content. And here we go. It already looks much better. We can confirm, we can cancel, and we can build a much more complex solutions on top of this generic component. As you can see, we can build a dialog box, we can build a form model. It all depends on what kind of children we are passing to this generic model component, and it also depends a bit on configuration that we are providing to this generic model component. So in our case, we can have additional prop to disable click away close, and in such case we're not able to close the component where we are clicking away. We delegate opening and closing to other UI elements on our application. So for instance, with this setting set to true, we can open the model, it always stays on top, and the only control to close it is delegated to confirm or cancel buttons that we're using here. There might be some use cases when you want to use the model in this way. There might be cases when you want to allow a click away to close it. It all depends on your particular implementation, but this generic model component is something that you will have in almost every project in order to handle models. Of course, there are a lot of UI libraries where you can have all of that functionality and even better out of the box. However, the purpose of this tutorial was to let you guys know how you can create something like that on your own and reuse it across your project for your needs. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it was useful for some of you. Feel free to add some comments under the video, and I am looking forward to seeing you all guys in the next tutorials on this channel. As I mentioned, this is my very first video. It's almost 4 o'clock in the morning right now when I'm recording it, so sorry for the screw-ups. If I forgot to mention anything, just hit me in the comment section, and I will definitely work on more useful content for you guys in the next tutorials. So if you enjoyed it, hit subscribe, hit some like, add some comments, and see you back, guys. Bye.